So my name is Lorraine Margherita. I'm based in Paris. I'm an organizational consultant, and I work with mostly international organizations. They have branches in different countries, and my job is to bring them together to work on what I call their collective dynamics. And so for me, decision making is going one step further in those dynamics because we change the way or the place where decisions are made. So I joined the mission circle of SOFA a few weeks ago. And the reason why we met is that Sociocracy is one way of making decisions. And I was interested in the many, many different ways we can have more people make decisions in organizations. So that's how we first started having a very fruitful conversation. And so today I suggested that I could speak about those different models and how they interconnect. And I'll be glad to listen also to the examples you have. So I'm going to start by asking you a question so that we can see who is in the room and what's your connection with all these topics. I'm going to ask you actually two questions. I decided to go without slides because I wanted to have a conversation with you and to be more interrelated without having your screen full of text and pictures that I would have created. So I would like you to tell us what kind of organization you are with. So the code will be to use A for associations and networks, B for business and cooperatives, and C for grassroots groups and nonprofits. And then to assess who knows what about sociocracy and to realize the level of details that you have in your information, I'd like to know between 1 and 4 how well you know sociocracy. So 1 is you know it super well, and 4 is you hardly know what it is about, so that we can have a better conversation later. Okay. So we have a lot of businesses, a few grassroots groups and nonprofits. Okay. Okay, we have associations as well. Less so. All right, and about your knowledge of sociocracy. Okay, we have a little bit of everything. 2, 3, 4, 2, 4. Okay. Okay, so that's a wide panel. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so as I said, I was interested. It started more than 10 years ago for me. I was intrigued by those organizations where not only leaders or new managers wanted to do things differently or were not comfortable with the way things used to be done when they arrived. But I remember one of the first stories I heard about letting the teams make the decisions was about this leader. It was a company in France, I think. And he said, I was trying to let the teams make their decisions, but then they would come back to me with questions, asking me for advice, and thinking that I was the CEO, I knew best. And it was very hard for him not to answer those questions or not to provide his advice or his opinion. And so in the end, he decided to leave for an entire year in a place where they could not call him. So he went sailing for a year so that he would not get calls. And it was his way of not being tempted to answer all the questions and to give answers when the teams were in a position to find their own answers. So I started listening to those stories and wondering how these companies were operating. And every time I found a new word about a model, a framework, a policy, I would write it down and try to figure out what it was. And little by little, I pulled the thread and I identified more than 40 different models. Okay, so sociocracy is obviously one of them, and it's very structured and very organized. Other models are not that structured and that organized. We'll see that in a few minutes. And so I would share these stories, not only because I was interested, but also because it's, as I said, it's part of my work. Collective dynamics is also how to make decisions together. And so I would share those stories with my clients to show them what was happening in other countries, in other industries, and to give them real life stories to show them different ways of doing things, different paths, how those companies had built on their culture. to find those ways of making decisions together. And I figured that if I had that many stories that I kept gathering and using for my clients, putting them in a book would be a better way to share them with more people. So that's what I did. I wrote this book that you may see on the screen here. It's called Shared Decision Making in the Corporate Arena. And it's actually a journey through industries, countries, and companies to show many different ways to make decisions together. So that's what I'm going to share with you today, with the intention to see how they interconnect. And again, just like what Ted showed us a few minutes ago with the screen, where he showed us we could see ourselves as people in little boxes that are next to one another. All those models are exactly the same. You could say there are boxes next to one another, and you pick one and you say, this is the way I'm going to do things. It doesn't work that way. As you can imagine, those decision-making models have a lot in common. Sometimes they build on one another. Sometimes it's just a new creation by someone who has a different inspiration or a different level of comfort with the way things are done in a more traditional organization, and they just start following their intuition and create something new. So the way I see those models is actually three circles that are one within, they fit one in the other. And so they impact more and more people. So the first circle for me is the impact those companies can have on the people who work for them. So it's sort of the first level. It's the impact on the teams. And for me, those are leaders who want to change the way things are done. So it can be simple things, you know, in the way organizations, meetings are run and in the way decisions are made here and there. And sometimes it's because they realize that they want to create something completely different. And so they really intentionally and consciously explore every avenue of how do we do this and this and this. And so they explore all the different departments of the organization, all the different levels in the organization to find things that they can change and make their work better, actually, both for the work itself and for the people who do it. So two examples I have been using. The first one I couldn't resist is the one created by Hindenburg itself. So as you know, it's the person who created Sociocracy. Does everyone know that story and that man, or see half and half? Okay. So Gerard Hindenburg was a Dutchman, and he became the managing director of the company that his father had bought a few years before. It was an electricity company. And his intention was to see how to be both excellent and to have social responsibility. So for him, it was the two dimensions that a company was expected to provide. And he was inspired by the school that he attended when he was a child. And that school involved the students in the decision making. So he wanted to do the same with his company, saying, why couldn't we be excellent and have a place where people are happy to work? So it sounds simple. And sometimes I'm dreaming of a society where all companies do that. Obviously, it's not that simple because not all the companies can achieve excellence and have people who are happy to come to work every morning. So that was his endeavor. And it took him 20 years to create all the rules that he thought could help achieve both goals. And that's how he created Sociocracy. So that was in the late 60s. And it's not until the 1980s that he considered he was done. So excellence and happiness were the two things that he wanted to achieve when he took over the company. Another example I always like to share is that of the subsidiary of the Air France group. So the airline that you probably all know, wherever you are in the world, actually. That company, that subsidiary is called HOP. It's actually the gathering of three different companies that were local companies, regional companies. So they came together to have more power together in the market. So three different local cultures. In any country, you can imagine it was tricky. And the man who became the CEO of that new organization was called Lionel Guérin. So he's a French pilot who became the CEO of the company. And he believes that the only limitations that we as humans have, is the limitations that we put on ourselves. And he always, when someone would show up and say, I have this decision to make, I have this topic I'm working on, and I have a decision to make, his answer would often be, you've been working on this so much more than I have. You know the topic better than I will ever know it. And so what is your suggestion? And he would help make the decision if necessary, but he was really very far away from thinking that the CEO knows better than the teams. He actually believes the opposite. So we worked together on how to help people realize when they have an idea, could they actually go ahead and implement that idea? And in what conditions would they need to be supervised or to ask, not for permission, but in an airline, you have security issues, for example. So one of the topic was how to make sure that the idea that this person is willing to implement is okay in terms of security for the company, both for the people who work in the company and for the customers, of course, and all the stakeholders around it. So we work together in different circles to see how, starting with the vision of the company and the values of the company, which are really decision-making tools, that's something I often say, he could help people realize that they could implement new ideas without asking too much for an upper level to make the decision for them. So as you see, those are two examples that I really like to illustrate what I mean by impact on the teams, because they really start with how could people be happy to work for my company? And it's, again, for me, it sounds very simple, but when I read the statistics about the situation of work in the world, I can just, the conclusion is that not every company does it or manages to do it. So Sociocracy is one of those models. You have probably heard about purpose-driven companies. So a company can just say, I'm purpose-driven. No one has the ability to say if it's true or not. Other models are more demanding. In France, we have a system or a status within the system that is called mission-driven company. And it was actually created by the law. So if you abide by a certain law, you can say that your company is mission-driven and you're going to be audited on a regular basis. So that's really something that you cannot just say, my company is mission-driven and it's wonderful. You really have to follow certain rules, a certain framework. Teal organizations are also a kind of company where the starting point is to make sure that everyone is happy to come to work in the morning. One of the key in the Teal organizations, as described, you probably all know the book by Frederic Laloux, Reinventing Organizations. Is that something that sounds familiar? Yes. Okay, so one of the keys in that model is what he calls wholeness, and that notion that when you come to work, you are the same person as the person you are when you're not working. Again, it could sound simple, but I think we all know, and maybe some of you are, people who play a different role when they're working and when they're not. So
Lorraine,
that's, yes?
just to be sure, you're not showing slides, or you don't want to show slides?
No, I'm not showing slides at all.
Great.
Yeah, because I want to tell a few stories and then I want to listen to your stories as well. So that's one way of starting, the impact on the teams that I tried to describe with a few examples. The second impact I've been working on is beyond the teams, the impact on the sustainability of the organization. So you may know that organizations have a higher chance of dying within a few years, or maybe 20 years, but I think it's even less than 10, than to be 70, 80, 100 years old. Okay, and so that triggered an observation in the 1980s at Shell, the oil company that you all know. The team that was working on the perspective for Shell started wondering how come some companies have actually survived more than 70 years. At the time it was 70, so today we all know companies that are more than 100 years old. And so they wondered, what do they have in common that can explain that they survived so long when it's not supposed to happen? And that's how Harry de Geus, who was the head of perspective at the time in the 1980s, created the notion of living company. Is it something that you've heard before? living company. It's also the title of a book. Yes, Mark, you've heard it. So the notion of living company is that it sort of focuses on itself when times are tough, and when times are
Lorraine,
less tough. Yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but there's some people in the chat asking if you could speak a bit more slowly, just to make it
Oh,
more
okay.
understandable for
Okay.
non-native
Sorry.
speakers.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I can't see everything. My notes, you and the chat. So I'm not checking the chat while I'm speaking. I can't do both. So thank you for helping me out. So I was talking about the living company and that notion that when times are tough, they focus on themselves. And you see, like naturally, when I tell you the story, I show this gesture of bringing my hands toward myself. And then when times are less tough, they open up and they start developing. And so that's the moment, when it's easier to be more open to what's going on outside because it's less demanding, it's less accelerating, it's less tough, then you can expand. And you see, I see the gesture that comes naturally. So he observed that companies that have thrived for more than 70 years at the time, and now 100 years, have that reflex of opening and then closing, or focusing, opening, focusing. And that is really, when I say that, I guess you all have in mind the movement that we do when we breathe. It's opening and then focusing, opening. So it's in and out. And that's the notion of living company that he's been working on. And that notion was also called for by Visa. Do you know Dee Hock, the creator of Visa? He created something that we call chaotism. In chaotism, you see chaos and order. And his vision of an organization was the combination of chaos and order. And so same notion of focusing and going outside, or developing towards the outside. And he created Visa with that vision in mind. So Visa, up until the IPO, where it went back to sort of a traditional way of running a company, was actually run as a set of networks of people and organizations who would make decisions in very different centers. That came to mind when Ted mentioned earlier the notion of companies that are not an island, and some of them, when they become bigger, they decide to split into smaller units so that within each unit, everyone is connected to everyone else. So Visa was like that for a number of years, and they helped create the Center for Organizational Learning at MIT, which was led by someone named Peter Senge, which you might know, who is the author of The Fifth Discipline. And he defined the notion of learning organization. And a learning organization, there are 4 different aspects in a learning organization. It's a place where people continually expand their capacity to create the results they truly desire, which connects to what we said earlier about the teams. They have new and expansive patterns of thinking. They have a collective aspiration, are set free. So that notion of freedom shows up in the 1990s already. And as you probably have heard recently, it has become very present in the last years, that notion of liberating companies and freeing the energies. That's so it started much earlier. And the final asset of a learning company is that people are continually learning how to learn together. So it's this organizational learning, just like we said earlier for Sociocracy, I believe, is focusing both on having people be happy to work and be developing and learning as individuals and collectively, and also they are performing and improving performance. So Visa was actually, with this chaotism framework or model or way of seeing a company, combined with living organization, inspired a lot of corporations that became cooperatives or employee-owned. So it's that notion that you can really impact the outcome in the long run for the company, building on the team inside. So it's the second circle with teams and sustainability. And then the final circle is we have an even greater ambition, because the final circle, which again includes the first 2 ones, is the impact on the planet. And for me, when I say planet, it means the environment, which sounds natural, but also the society. Society is also impacted by those companies. And so I would say that it's an even broader intention to have an impact on the world. And it's because when you start taking into account not only the stakeholders in terms of your clients, your teams, your providers, or any person or organization that is impacted by your activity, but it's also what's beyond. It might be people you will never see. It might be people who will never be your client, for example. And so in that regard, we have an example of someone I interviewed for my book who works with the company Leroy Merlin. For those of you in the US, it's sort of a Home Depot. So it's a company that sells everything you need to improve your home, inside and outside. So it was created after the First World War for people who wanted to make their house look beautiful again. And that company started working on their vision in 1995. So at the time, I don't think that many companies used that word of vision, and they did it very collaboratively. They still do it, actually. They keep doing it, and they keep including more and more people. And so their vision is that they have an impact on people that will never set foot in their stores. So they're really thinking about the world around them. And other companies like that are, so yeah, what I wanted to say about this person I interviewed, his name is Nicolas Cordier, and he's a social entrepreneur. And he was inspired by Mohamed Yunus. Do you know that person? Is that a name that rings a bell? Yeah, I'm happy to see that. No, some of them know, but I see some of you do. He won a Nobel Prize for Peace. He created the notion of social business in Bangladesh in the 1970s. And so he created a structure for people to actually provide for themselves. And so unlike an NGO that would provide for people who are in a difficult situation, those people create a business to provide for themselves. So it's both social and business, which he used both words, not trying to make things complicated. And so Leroy Merlin has created a structure within the company to go into that direction. So the entire company is not a social business, but they have part of their teams that are now dedicated to that kind of actions. And another example that comes to mind is Patagonia. So I was lucky enough to interview the former HR head of Patagonia. And that's the only example I know. And it's so unique. So as you probably know, they started with being intentional in their respect for the environment. It was created by people who loved hiking and going into nature and surfing. But they ended up turning their entire business into what can we do to help the planet sort of survive humans. So it's not only they do their business and pay attention to the environment has become their business, so to speak. Other companies in that same family are the B Corps, because they're a stakeholder-driven model, and they also focus on the environment and on the impact that they can have on society as well. And as you probably know, I was mentioning earlier, purpose-driven companies can just say, I'm purpose-driven, and no one can say yes or no. For some models, it's not true. So mission-driven companies in France or B Corps, because you cannot just say, I'm a B Corp. It's actually a standard where you get a score depending on your situation. You describe your situation, and then it shows what score you get on a scale that everyone has the same scale, and then you can see how high you rank on that scale, and if it allows you to say that you're a B Corp or not. You cannot just decide for yourself. So that's another example. And another example I like to mention is what we call the humanistic companies. It's a concept that was created by a French psychologist who worked on positive psychology. And so he shows how those companies are concerned by their impact on their employees and all the stakeholders around them. And so again, they cannot consider business as just something they have to do whatever the cost. It is really something that they can do to have an impact on everyone inside and outside the company, which is the point with that notion of impact on the planet. So as you can see, all these companies have a lot in common. And actually, I would like to give you the floor and see what you have experienced in your own position, or you have heard about stories around you, and see what you can see in common in all those models. So Sociocracy is one of them. As I said earlier, it's one of them, and there are plenty of others. And you might have an experience in other models. So I'd like to know, for example, if I asked you, if you take a position in a new company, or you start a project, it can be just a project, not necessarily an entire company. What are the things that you know will help you succeed to have an impact on your teams, your sustainability, the environment, and society? What would you say? You can just open your mics and let us know. I'm checking what's going on in the chat as well.
I'll try and break the ice.
Thank you, Priel.
I've stumbled into this world of decision making, or collective decision making, and specifically what some call self-management, out of deep frustration. So and intuition somewhat. So it comes from, I grew up in a somewhat democratical or open school. So we had an assembly, we could decide things. I was a part of the commission that took care of the IT system of the school. This was where I grew up in. And then being born and raised in Israel, and just to make sure I'm landing correctly now, I went out of Israel, and I'm highly critical of what's going on right now. If you want to talk about that, please shoot me a note, but be aware that I'm not on the Israeli side of the equation right now, which is terribly difficult with my family and friends. But just saying, I had to go. I also decided to, but military service was obligatory. And so from that school to military service, then to the world of work, was deeply frustrating, right? And at some point that convinced me that the way we organize, broadly speaking, is inherently violent, inherently systemically violent to us and to everything else. We force ourselves on each other, and we force ourselves onto everything else. We force nature, we force people, we force society, we force values, it's the application of force on a systemic level. And something just seemed very wrong about this, but I didn't know what else to do, right? I had no other tools, and I had to go through many, many iterations of trying to. And right now I'm working within a consultancy firm that does this, helps clients around this. And so I find it a deep connection to who I am, and I find it deeply needed outside, to make it so that deciding, if we're talking about decision making, deciding is not something that we do to each other or to something else, or forcing something on someone, but it's taking care of what I need, what you need, what something else needs, what someone else needs, and balancing those in a way that doesn't hurt possibly anybody, or mitigating damage in a way, which I really like about consent decision making as a practice. I don't know if that answers the questions, but I wanted to.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that the way it happened for you is similar to what happened to Endenburg, the creator of Sociocracy, because he was very impressed by the way things were run when he was at school as a young boy. So it's interesting to see the parallel. And what I hear is you would say that avoiding violence is one of the keys that we're after in that session. Yeah.
Yes. I have my own definition of violence, but I'd like to use strong words that comes from my Israeli side.
Yeah. I see that we have a few hands raised. I don't know who was first. I see Roger has, yeah. So what's your take?
Thank you so much, Lorraine, for this. This was really interesting.
Oh, I can't hear you anymore. Yeah, I think there is a, we can see you're talking, but we can't hear. Maybe we can let Mark speak and then we'll get back to you. Oh, yeah, now it's okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Housing and ended
No.
up coming up here to Amherst. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm turning the volume up, and but I can see other people frowning,
Okay.
so I'm not sure. Yeah, now it's better.
Yeah,
How
if
about
you're
now?
close to the
Okay.
microphone.
Okay. Then I came up here and worked with Ted and Jerry at SOFA doing a bunch of stuff with content and training and everything. And we came upon commoning and the work of prosocial and then Ostrom, and then came upon social to come and talk with us. And we did some workshops on the correlations between sociocracy and where sociocracy fits within pro-social organizations. And then we and the whole commoning realm with David Bollier, who went on beyond that to form the, not beyond the principles of commoning to the triad, the patterns of commoning. And I wondered if you or anybody else has anything, and I can put some links in the chat.
That would be wonderful because I no, I don't have that information. So I'd be happy to keep digging because, as I said, I found many different models and I keep finding new ones, even now after so many years. So yeah, please share them in the chat. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I can't hear you anymore. I don't know if I'm the only one.
No, Roger, I think we
Yeah,
it's very
the
tough to
sound
hear
is
you.
gone again. Yeah.
Maybe I suggest you type it in the chat.
okay.
Yeah.
And then we
Thank
can
you.
go to Mark's question, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks.
Yeah, hey, I reframe my answer because now I see your question in a different way than I expected it. Just my story is, my home is S3, James Priest and Lily from England. There 10 years ago, I learned about sociocracy. I'm an OD consultant for 23 plus years. And when I answer that question, what you already know would be key to giving space to everyone. I would observe in the beginning, and I would say early in the process that I'm not an expert. I'm perhaps an expert in defining a process or framework, but I'm not the one who will tell them what to do. And I try to establish first steps of a trust relationships to the people sitting in the room, talking about psychological safety, for example, or just not starting with the solution, but really understanding what's going on. This would be my reframed answer. Yeah. The other answer I just still want to share is when I look back after now 10 years working specifically with self-management and shared power, and I see the clients I have, when you look at the polarity between abundance and scarcity, the polarity between interconnectedness and separation, between humanistic approach or mechanic approach, or the last one, sustainable development or economic growth. And I have the feeling many of my clients are more on the left side of this polarity. It's not black or white, but it's interesting that there is some kind of different mindset around.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't start.
Yeah, I like what you say about trust, because as it's actually the foundation of some of the examples I share in my book and in my work. They start by they call that trust-based management. So it's actually how to use trust. I mean, use not in a bad sense, but how to use trust as the way to connect and decide together. And you mentioned growth. I saw that someone mentioned that Patagonia declined the model of growth. So yeah, I'm just like you. I guess most of my clients are on the same side of your polarities as you describe, and I think that's it's the way organizations are going. They started in a different place, and they're finding a way to move along, and they need the help of people like us to keep going forward into different polarities. Yeah. We have Jackie who wanted to ask a question as well, or answer the question.
Yeah, my name is Jackie McLeod, and I have nothing to do with the business side.
Okay.
I'm a member of a co-housing community in Durham, North Carolina, and I've been a member for about 5 years, and we really were just working to get the building off the ground. We're a condominium co-housing, urban condominium co-housing community. And what I want to say is, even though we've been working with Sociocracy almost from the beginning, and all of us understand that, and some of us understand Sociocracy better than others. And even though that was all clearly in place, whenever we started a large project within the big project, what you and Mark just referred to would really become apparent, the lack of trust, even though we were the ones working. Just a very simple example, I'm an artist, and as part of that, I was tasked with a group of people in the circle to come up with the interior design of the communal lobby lounge. And even though all of us had an interest in this and had maybe some professional knowledge, there was a clear lack of trust and unhappiness with what we were doing, even though we were very open and were putting up poster boards and showing and pictures and sending out emails and meeting in person to talk about it. And in the end, when the lobby lounge was done, it was like, oh, it's really lovely, you did a really good job. But up until that point, there was a distrust. It's just the feeling that you were not being heard, that the others are not being heard. And as we have moved forward over the last 2 years in the process of creating our common spaces and learning to live together, what we have found is the single most helpful tool to gain trust is to have a numerous input sessions where we just go and say, we want to plant plants in the yard or whatever, make a garden. And just to have people come, set times where everybody can come and talk to you, write down, take note, take it seriously, and take into account what people have said or not. You know, it might make sense at this time or not. But just the fact of being heard, of feeling heard, has made such a difference to the trust of the various circles and their work. And we are now finally starting to move away from the leaving decisions in the circles and sub-circles who work with that daily, rather than keep coming back to the central, whatever it is, mission circle, plenary, whatever you want to call it, where everybody sits and gets a say and things. But now we're finally relaxing into, we've got this. So it's been a journey.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing your story. I think it's very powerful. It shows when I work, I use collaborative practices all the time. I partner with the organizations I work with. And as Mark said, we don't show up and say, this is what you should do, even if we have studied their situation and interviewed people. And so what you're saying is first of all, to let people speak up. So and that's where it's a journey, and it's not a decision that will happen overnight or be implemented overnight. You need to get everyone to feel that it's okay to speak. And so they have to try, maybe, you know, if they're not certain that they will be listened to, or they're not certain how far they can be transparent in what they're sharing, or how radical their feedback will be. They have to try and see, yes, they are actually listened to. And even if it's to do something that they would not suggest or that they're against, their position was taken into account. And I think that's really one of the starting point in all those stories. Thank you, Jackie. I'm not sure I say it right. Hallström is your first name?
Yeah, Eskil is my first name. That's okay.
Oh, okay. That's how you're playing tricks with us. Okay.
Maybe I inputted it incorrectly. I'm not sure. Anyhow, I'm not sure if I know like the one most important thing, but there are so many important things. But to me, one very crucial thing is to have a process for self-reflection, both teams and for individuals, because there are so many methods and so many new things that are happening that even if we find something that works really, really well, it's not gonna be perfect forever. So then having this process in place to sense what is happening within the group, what is happening within yourself, and what is needed, to have that structure, to always come back to that regularly, at least. That I think that is very crucial to keep like on top of things and stay true both to yourself and your mission. Yeah.
It makes me think of that notion of feedback that Sociocracy is very strong about, to be able to assess on a regular basis what is it that we're doing and how well is it working. And I often say, when I work with clients, I often say that what you're doing is with the people who are here now. So as you said, there are other options. Maybe you would have done something different 5 years ago, or you will be doing something different in 10 years. What you're doing is now with the people who are here. And obviously, some of those people will not be here in a number of years, other will join, and then it's an ongoing process. Yeah, I think that's an important point. Thanks a lot. We have a few more minutes, I think. So I'd be happy to hear more of what you think those stories and models have in common that makes them sustainable. And as you just said, they don't work for everyone all the time, but Brian, yes.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to reiterate a little bit what other people have said, but I mean, I've been lucky, since my 20s to always be, working in participatory, non-hierarchical kind of spaces.
Cool.
But when I find myself in places where people aren't familiar with that, people don't want to share, or they're not, they don't expect that they can. So it always takes, it takes a while to get people comfortable. And so in the company I'm with now, we use Sociocracy, for ourselves, but also when we get new clients, we'll start off by just sort of introducing a basic structure, and they seem to really appreciate, just even having the reaction rounds and the chance to reflect at the end of the meeting, like, was just noted, and knowing that what they're talking about is being recorded and and put into the minutes, and they can see it. We do a collaborative minute taking, so everybody sees the minutes being built as the meeting's progressing, and that's the feedback we've gotten, is that it inspires people to be more active in it, and that's what we like. And but it's often been a struggle to sort of get people comfortable with it, so it takes a few times to to make sure everybody feels okay speaking.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, but that's it. I mean, and whether it's Sociocracy or other models, I think those key things are like, the common sort of building blocks of all these models is like get everybody participating, and then start to figure out what that structure is so that everybody's participating and not just
True. Yeah. I think I've seen teams where when they hear we're going to listen to you and we're going to interview you or gather your feedback, they might be concerned that sometimes they have had that experience and then nothing happened, which is probably the worst, or they are not certain that it's for sure, it's for real. So they want to share, but then they're not certain that it's going to happen, like, fully. So they start by not saying too much or not believing it too much. And then when they see that it's visible to see, it's important to see the contribution. So if what they said is in the minutes, then it means that it's going to be listened to and it's going to be kept. And so what's going to happen after that is going to be based on what they're saying. So I think that's we need to prove and show and walk the talk, as we often say. Eric, I see you raise your hand.
Yes, thank you. I am working and have been working in the nonprofit, non-governmental organization world, not the corporate world. And one thing that I notice very obviously is that the organizations that are sustainable, one of the factors that makes them that is that they have an understanding of their values. And they use those values when making decisions. The types of organizations that you mentioned, some of it seem very obvious that they did have values and were using them. And I don't know if all of them are like that. I'm not familiar with all of those different ones. But my question to you is, how important do you think it is to have common values?
I think it's foundational. I often say that it's actually, unlike what many people might think or might have thought when this whole movement started, I think it's a decision-making tool because it connects to the vision. I think it's sort of the other aspect of the vision that you can have for the company. And so it's really, what is your intention? Sometimes I ask my client, what would happen if your company did not exist, or your team or your business unit? What would be missing in the world if you didn't exist? And I think that if you share that direction, we use the word direction to say directors, direction committee, we say in French. It's really the direction, not in terms only of controlling and having authority on other teams or other people. It's also showing the direction. It's saying, okay, this is where we're going. And now, how do you think we can achieve that? Because obviously, even if you have a great vision for your company, you could not do it alone. So I think values are really key. And I also think, I was mentioning, if it saddens me, and I'm someone who's optimistic. So when I see the statistics about the situation of work, I disagree with some of them actually, because that's really not what I see in the companies I work with, partner with. But I think that the values are really what can make someone thrive at work, whatever the work is. And I'm wondering if it's not the reason why so many people are unhappy at work, because there is a disconnect or conflict between what they really believe in and what they want to achieve, whatever their job and their position is, and what they see and do every day. So yeah, I think that values, and it's sad because at some point they could have been, and maybe sometimes in companies they're still used as a more of a communication tool. It sounds nice to say that we are concerned about whatever. I mean, there are so many of them, but when you actually connect to the teams and get the values identified with the teams, I mean, there is something going on in the room that is just unbelievable, because it goes back to what we were saying about people being heard. When we work, like you have 200 people in the room and they come up together, and with a different set of processes, they come up with 3 or 4 values for their unit or their company. There is something magical in the company that happens at this point, when they realize what they're all here for. And it's also because they realize that they are going to be listened to, and it's them. It's as if you were showing them a picture of, this is who you are. Yeah, give me goosebumps just thinking about those episodes. I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop talking, right?
Yes, there's Mark. You still had one
Maybe
question.
Mark, yeah, one last comment, and I guess we'll wrap up the session.
It's not a comment, but it's a question. I wanted to share something else, but after what Eric said, yesterday I had lunch with a friend from me, and we made a case. Imagine he has a new client, a pension fund, who wants to get more agile. And just imagine you talk to the CEO, and he has an absolutely humanistic lovely mindset, but he has a COO and a CFO who have a totally different mindset, who believe people are driven by extrinsic factors, etc. What do you do? How do you change, or do we have the right to change the mindset of others?
Wow. So that's a very long and broad question, and I'm afraid. So yeah, which drives me to if we want to keep that conversation going, I'd be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way, or on my website, Co-Dynamics, because I've heard very interesting things, and I see that there are plenty of things in the chat that I will not be able to deal with right now. The short answer is no, you cannot change someone's mindset. The longer answer is you can create the conditions for the mindset to take into account the culture and the existing mindset and evolve toward what you're trying to achieve. That's the very short answer I can give at this point. So thank you everyone for your participation. I was super happy to hear your stories and to get your feedback. I'm going to read what's in the chat when the session is over. If you want to leave by telling us in the one word in the chat what you're leaving this session with, so that we can wrap up and check out, as we often do in Sociocratic meetings, for those of you who have chance to participate in them. And then I'll let Jonas. I don't even know what I have to do to finish the session logistically or in terms of IT. So I'll just.
I will finish the session. Don't worry. Thank you a
Okay,
lot for
excellent.
this.
Thank you so much. Leave your
Lorraine.
feedback in the chat, and I guess I'll see you around because there are many other wonderful sessions coming up for this conference day. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Roger.
Lorraine, I'm gonna save this chat because I think it might be.
Oh yes, please, because I saw that there were many comments and I couldn't read them. So I'd be super happy to get the chat. Yes.
But I'll wait a bit longer so we have everything.
Do you have everything?
Well, I get when everybody's gone, then I will save the chat, and then I don't know if I can send it to you so you can put it in the course materials, I guess, or something.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I usually share my notes with the participants. So do you want my address? Should I type my email address in the chat so that you can send it to me, or how do you want to do that?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, did you say yeah?
Yeah, you can also save it, but I will save it and send it to you.
Because I looked if I could save it, but I don't see see the.
It's up. There's 3 little dots, and then you can do on the top of the chat.
Oh, it's up there now. Okay.
Can you see the 3 little dots?
Chat.
And then
Oh,
you have
yes, you're
save
right.
chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was looking for it at the bottom. All right. Thank you very much, Jonas. Have a great afternoon or day.
You too.
Yeah, you're in Belgium, right?
I'm in Belgium, yeah, not so far
So
from you.
yeah, so it's afternoon. Yeah.
Exactly. Bye-bye.
Bye.